I don't know. I know people listening to this might think, why do we want to hear these two guys? They're not experts on any of this. We're just trying to sort it out. We're trying to make sense of it. I'm trying to make sense of the culture mostly, Nate. I mean, it was interesting to me. I've said it a few different times that there weren't really players in any sport under 20 men. I mean, WNBA is a different deal, who were supporting the Democratic candidate. And that seemed like a new thing. As somebody who observes the cultural space in sports, what do you think is going to happen downstream of this? Do you think people are going to get into it with Trump like Steph and LeBron did back in the day? Or do you think that we're living now in an era where politics is compartmentalized away from the athletic space? Because that's what it's looking like right now.
I do think that players, as you've mentioned before, many players are much more conservative in some of their views than they're able to share publicly, right? So I think you've gotten into that before, and understand that they're smart enough not to say certain things online because they know that they're going to get backlash from it, unless you're like Kyle Kuzma, who just doesn't care and says whatever he just says red.
But even there, I totally forgot that he did that until you brought that up, and then I went, oh yeah, he's shared some takes. Yes, but you were saying,
yeah. So you have that dynamic, and then I also think there was a dynamic that we just explained earlier, like how I felt in 2016 because of what we were told, that we were on the verge of fascism. This guy is Hitler. He's whatever. And people live through it. And the players included have experienced that. And then they've also seen the, I don't know how I would phrase it, but just the cultural shift in how anything they possibly could have done wrong can be elevated quickly in the, it's almost like gotcha. You're supposed to treat people this way and you didn't treat them that way kind of thing. Perfect example is the kicker that you documented from
Bucker. Harrison Bucker.
Exactly. You think players aren't paying attention to that and understanding that the side that they're supposed to be supporting just automatically defaults to trying to end someone's career and life and whatever else based off of, this is just the way it's supposed to be. Anytime an accusation comes to the forefront, you automatically did it. You're guilty.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Harrison Bucker. I mean, Matt Ariza, who was the one who was accused there are various, special teamer controversies over the past few years. Ariza, he was out of SDSU and he was called Punt God because he just incredible talent. Just these booming punts, and he got drafted by the Buffalo Bills. And there's an accusation he participated in a brutal gang rape at a frat party at SDSU. And there was this social media outrage, a media outrage. People were horrified by details of the allegations in the lawsuit, right? There's this thing, there's almost a legal literacy in media that's lacking, where a lawsuit will happen and everybody will react to the lawsuit as though because it's written, it definitely happened. And so the Bills cut him. He's out of the league. And the prosecutors from San Diego announced at some point that there was video of the incident. They reviewed everything and they cannot press charges because he did not do what he was accused of at the very least. And it made kind of a ripple. People barely cared about it. I wrote about it. People were not nice when I wrote about it. But then Dan Wetzel at Yahoo wrote about it. And eventually he was allowed back into the NFL after, was he gone 2 seasons or 1 season? I can't remember. But now he's on the Chiefs and nobody cares and it's all fine. But that was a situation where there was a rush to judgment, guilty until proven innocent. And even after the innocence was proven, you're still guilty to a certain extent in some pockets of media. And I do think players observe that sort of thing and understand that there's this narrative of who's always correct and who's always the victim when it's in dispute. And I'm gonna make another point on that, and you can take this one or leave this one. When it comes to players and women, their perspective on women, I think, is sometimes a little bit different from a normal person's, because they do sometimes interact with women who are perhaps not as morally upstanding as your mother, dear listener. they interact with women who might have designs on their finances and might be contriving a way to trap them. And if you don't believe me, you can I don't know, read some of the work of Brittany Renner, who has turned over a new leaf in her life, but that's neither here nor there. So when they're hearing that in all these instances, it's definitely the man is guilty and the woman is totally innocent, I think a lot of athletes, let's say, might be skeptical. That's how I'll put it, Nate.
Yeah, as soon as I knew you were going to bring up Brittany, and I was like, I'm still disappointed before she supposedly turned over her new leaf as a good Islamic woman that she did not come on. I've always wanted to see the Ethan and Brittany interview.
Brittany Renner on this podcast still. So if anybody has a connection to her, knows how to communicate with her, this is a woman who basically wrote a book on how to trap an athlete and was no less successful doing so after giving the whole spiel about it. But yes, Nate.
Yeah.
I was asking.
Yeah. I think that can play into it. And this is stuff that no one's going to say. They're not going to say publicly or whatever, but yeah, they are targeted in some ways. And then in other ways they participate in it. And a lot of times it's a market. And I couldn't even imagine, especially in the social media age, where there are no barriers. Anyone that wants to unless you turn your direct messages off on all your social media platforms, anyone that wants to reach you, they can reach you. So yeah, they are targeted. No judgment whatsoever. Just put it this way, but the idea that someone has been in a category similar to Brittany Renner, and been I don't know, is it an Instagram model, or you've heard stories that, you never know who to believe when Gilbert Arenas is telling a story, but you've heard stories from Gilbert Arenas from back when he was playing in the league in early 2000s, that a woman that was popular at that time is 40 years old now and marrying a younger NBA star that's 20 years, basically the same age as her son. That kind of gives you a glimpse of the dynamic that goes on there, right? I think players are that could be playing into not just the automatic check the box belief system that is pushed by the far left, right? Which is anything a woman says, you're supposed to believe it. And that is not necessarily true. The way our legal system works, just because it's written on a piece of paper and submitted as a lawsuit, doesn't mean it's actually true. You have to go through a process, as I'm forgetting the kicker's name again, but as we experienced with him.
Ariza. Well, and Derrick Rose, I think in the NBA was a situation where back then, I don't remember that happened square in the middle of Me Too, but there was a lot of media.
It 100% did.
Yeah. And there was a lot of media assumption that this is a bad guy. He's effectively guilty. Look at this. Look at what's written out right here. And it was okay. So that's a good one to bring up, actually, because there was, and it's now going to be forgotten, this shift within some pockets of sports media that we need to now treat Derrick Rose like he's a bad guy because he's being accused of this by an ex-lover of his. And in the league, I think there was a certain under the surface reaction because people love Derrick Rose.
They do.
Not every player in the league is well liked or thought of as a good guy, especially among superstars. And Derrick Rose was somebody where maybe he has flaws, maybe he has faults, but teammates and coaches just loved him. Ron Adams with the Warriors, old sage Ron Adams, just loved Derrick Rose. And so there was this under the surface sense back then that Derrick Rose is getting railroaded and I can't talk about it. And I'm not supposed to say anything about it. This guy I know, I'm making the argument that they're talking about and the way they're making it behind the scenes, but this guy I know to be a great guy is being pilloried and they're trying to drive him out of the league. And it's not even a situation, by my recollection, that's a criminal case. I think it was a civil case.
It was.
And ultimately, it was a case that he won. But that was an example of something within the NBA context, at least, that I think spurred some skepticism.
There are examples of dudes doing bad stuff. We've seen it with We've seen it with I don't want to get the Bridges mixed up.
Oh yeah,
not Mikal Bridges, but Miles Bridges in the domestic violence, and we've seen the video of it. And obviously, we don't have the full context of their relationship and whatever else. But still, at the end of the day, a man that size should not be beating on a woman that.
But
right?
That almost speaks to the chasm between the athlete culture and some of the fans and media, because Bridges, best I can tell, did something absolutely horrific that in a perfect world teammates would have disavowed, but they didn't. And I felt like that was a shock to many people, but it spoke to this chasm of perspective.
I think that many do behind the scenes. I know for a fact that many do behind the scenes. They just can't. There's a brotherhood thing. They'll talk shit with each other about stuff that's happening on the court and what your game is like, and you don't really care about basketball, or the kind of stuff like Draymond Green will say, right? But they're never going the brotherhood thing, like breaking that publicly, even with a horrific situation like that. It's not real. You don't really see guys step out in that way. Then when it comes to back to the Derrick Rose situation, however you feel about that, the reason the players love Derrick Rose is because he's genuine. Whatever his public bedroom life or whatever it is like, that is really like, we're not privy to that. We're not in the middle of it. We don't know what goes on there. But his persona, dealing with people one-on-one, dealing with them as teammates and groups, whatever, what everyone always says is he's one of the most genuine people they've ever come across in the league. And that's why they like him so much. So the idea that, he's getting caught, like this genuine dude that's already been through so much with his ACL issues and everything else is kind of getting railroaded in their view, right? Like that's why you have that pushback there.
Yeah, and there's this other weird aspect to talk about with the Derrick Rose thing, which we talk about anything. So we'll say things other people won't say. I think one of the issues that was not discussed in the aftermath of the Derrick Rose accusations was that the exonerating explanation still grossed out media members, which is basically that a group of men had sex with one woman, which I think is more normal in certain milieus in athlete culture than, say, in journalist culture. That's just not, as far as I know. I mean, I have not been on the NBA circuit in a while, Nate, so maybe things have changed. Maybe that's more normal. I
don't even know from
those in the press box.
The funny thing is, I don't really have stories from my NBA career about that. But I had friends that played college football, and it felt like more of a
college football thing.
Football thing. It's a very common thing, and it's not. I mean, I think people looking at it from the outside in would say that those people are bad. But if it's a consensual situation, how can you label them bad, right? Like if the person hasn't been drugged, isn't drunk, isn't whatever else, then I don't know if you can. It just, I think culturally is something that happens at that level and at those ages that is hard for a normie to wrap their head around. Right. Yeah. Like I've never experienced that. Like I don't want to speak for you. I've never experienced. I have no problem to say I've never experienced that.
Yeah.
So that just because I haven't experienced that and that's not my norm doesn't mean that it makes it wrong for someone else to operate that way, especially when it's all consenting adults. So.
I just feel like there is this unarticulated sense of that's gross and that's wrong. But according to my belief system, I am, non-judgmental about people's proclivities. So I'm not going to articulate that. But secretly, I'm going to go, which I think I do have some measure of in response to it. I just don't necessarily think that the participants are bad people. It's more... Man, I don't understand that. It's like when I watch somebody do travel for food shows and people are eating something and I'm going, I don't even understand. You're going to eat the undigested stuff from the cow's guts? That's crazy. That's how I feel about it, Nate.
Hey, to each their own. Everybody has their thing, and everyone has their thing and their preferences, and especially in their private lives, as long as it's not violating someone else, who are we to judge, right? Like we're all just trying to get through this life. So yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it. But we're on House of Strauss, so I can say whatever I want. But me personally, I think the reason something like that would always be a turnoff to me is I just don't want another dude around while whatever I'm doing. No. I'm just not interested in that. But that it feels like, especially when you talk about it from a football team perspective, it's almost like a bonding for them.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
It seems like that's part of it.